everybody. Once again, we are back and here to help Gordon Dill with consumer expert Diane Lee. Diane, we're going to talk about something first today that I think isn't always a ripoff, isn't always a scam, but boy, we're nervous that we're going to be ripped off or scammed.
Yeah, and you never really know, Gordon. We're talking about contractor issues. When you hire someone to do work on your home, you pay money. They require some of that money at least to be upfront. And then sometimes they don't complete the job or do it in a way that is not satisfactory, and you don't hear back. That's the problem. Check this out.
We get a lot of complaints from homeowners who hire contractors and pay thousands up front, only to have the job go unfinished. I'm 7 News consumer anchor Diane Lee, and I talked to an upstate couple with a warning about why it's so important to thoroughly vet anyone you hire.
So as far as the facelift, these are some of the details that we found.
For the last 2 years, Jeremy Bass has been consumed by a desire to save others from the financial and emotional hardship he says he's come to know.
What we want is for other folks to be warned and for this to stop.
In 2022, Bass signed a contract with 180 Handyman Solutions in Pickens County to do a 3-part renovation to their home. He and his wife Ginger say they felt comfortable paying thousands up front to owner Timothy Porter because he talked about being a minister at a church nearby.
He presented himself as a man of faith and just instantly had a great rapport with him.
So the Basses paid Porter $13,500 as a down payment. But months before any work began, Ginger lost her job, and they had to scale back the $32,500 kitchen renovation.
So this wall was supposed to go away.
Bass showed 7 News the interior wall still standing, though the contract that included its removal was never altered. He says they took it on faith when Porter agreed to a much smaller job for the original down payment.
Do you wish you had had it in writing, the changes that were made to pare back?
To sitting here today? Absolutely. But I'll go back and further. I wish I never would have talked to him and met him any time in my life.
When the kitchen was done, Bass says Porter told him he had gone over by $4,000 and they agreed to pay the extra cost. At the same time, they paid up front for the final project, a bathroom renovation for $16,000. The total in one check, $20,000. The $180 for Bass came when Porter sent this receipt claiming that check was for the kitchen only.
Foolishly, I paid him in advance for that. And on here I even put in the memo line, bath, bed remodel.
I was appalled and shocked and felt duped.
After 2 years in the court system, a judge ruled last month Porter owes Bass the $16,000. But Bass is skeptical he'll get that money back after doing a public index search and discovering a history of cases against Porter. 7 News reached out to South Carolina Labor Licensing and Regulation and learned Porter's residential contractor license was revoked back in 2011 after many of those judgments found him guilty of taking money and not completing the job.
Hello.
Oh, hi, Tim. It's Diane Lee with Channel 7.
Porter declined an on-camera interview, but in a brief phone call,
I have to ask you, I am recording now.
we asked him about a license number that appeared on all the documents given to the Basses.
No, ma'am, I don't know what you're talking about.
So the license number on your document, 8723744, you're not familiar with?
I had a stroke 6 years ago, and it affected my memory, and I really, honestly, Diana, don't know what you're talking about.
The word license, though, with a number on your documents, it's right there at the head.
I'm not answering any further questions until I talk to my attorney.
His attorney did not respond to our questions about the license, but said the Basses won by default because his client had failed to respond before hiring him. He called the case a, quote, misunderstanding between the parties as to what the terms of the agreement were, and stressed that the judge did not award further damages. Attorney Jay Anthony, who represents Bass, says while most of the cases on public index against the contractor date back a decade, he has spoken to more current clients of Porter who have similar stories but can't afford a lawyer.
We did feel like there was a pattern there, both in terms of not doing the work that he was paid to do, but also in terms of doing work that he wasn't licensed to do.
Another pattern is how Porter has changed company names over time. Public Index links him to 3 before 180 Handyman. And now 7 News has learned his latest company, Fieldstone Solutions, which retrofits sheds into tiny homes, has run into its own issues. An attorney with Kentucky-based Stormore told 7 News it terminated Fieldstone as a dealer last year because, quote, we received customer complaints that Fieldstone Solutions was taking deposits to convert our sheds into a tiny home and then failing to promptly perform that work.
What do you want to drink?
The Bassetts urge you to do your homework before hiring any contractor. Verify their license with LLR. Check to see they're bonded and insured. Keep an updated contract. And in the least, read Google reviews.
I don't want anybody else to go through this.
Now, Pickens County Building and Code confirmed that Timothy Porter does not have the license needed from the state to do the tiny home work. And the pattern continues. A client of that business told me today that they lost their life savings on a tiny home they paid for last summer that has never arrived.
Man, every time you say somebody loses their life savings, it is just, it's devastating to hear something like that, Diane. There's so much to talk about here, and as reporters with decades of experience, we're pretty comfortable digging into LLR records and court history records for all these civil cases. But for the average person who maybe is not as adept at looking that kind of stuff up, the number one takeaway from this, what's the best piece of advice for hiring a contractor?
You want to do your homework, and that's going to include the agencies that you just mentioned, Gordon. So we really want to educate people here on how to do that. So first of all, easy step, do a Google search. Check any reviews on them, but then you want to go a little bit deeper. And Gordon, I believe we do have the LLR website here.
Okay,
so this is South Carolina specific, but no matter where you live, they're going to have a labor and licensing site. And here on LLR, you would go to the licensing services tab up there, and when you click on that, it'll allow you to have a drop down, and here you can do things as you see, file a complaint. Well, under that is license lookup. So when we click on license lookup, you can do this for really not just contractors, but check out this drop down list here of all the different agencies. When you click on accountant, actually the arrow down, right there, that little next to accountant, that little like.
No, I got it.
Yeah.
It's not showing up on our deal here, but for instance.
Oh, okay, I see. So you're, yes,
so if
okay.
I click, let's say, contractors, which
you're going to click. Okay. So just so the viewers who are seeing this know, there's a function on the website that didn't show you the drop down, but you will see it on your website when you do a search, and it's for all the different types of businesses out there. So Gordon clicked specifically on contractor there, and here's where you would enter the contractor information. So for instance, Porter did give a specific license on his document. So let's check that license.
Check this out.
Yeah.
I'll click here where it says licensee number. So it's the second thing on the left, and I typed in the number provided on your forms, which is this one right here.
Yeah, so we'll just go right to that.
And now I have to prove I'm a human.
Are you a human?
Well, let's see here. Here we go. Zero records. That's the important part.
Yeah, 0 records.
So this is what you're getting at, and I think there is a license that you said that was associated with this contractor that is now revoked almost 15 years ago.
Right.
And so what is this number? I heard you get him on. I have to say, when you're a reporter, you get people all the time who say, I'm not going to have any comment, and then like this guy did, they immediately start answering
Well,
your
you'll
questions.
notice we said not only who we were, we also said that we were recording.
Very important.
And then actually that whole segment, that phone call was a little bit longer. He really, we asked him so many times about the license. Every response was, I just don't remember, obviously the medical issue that he presented. And we wanted to hold him accountable and get to the bottom of what is that license, but he had no answer for us. And what is also extremely concerning is several back and forth emails that I've had requesting phone calls with his attorney on that specific license issue. And any time that I've mentioned the license issue, the attorney has not responded. I've asked point blank, what is that license number? Does he have a license? And none of that is returned in writing or in a phone call. So obviously it's an issue that they're not wanting to overtly talk about, and that's a big red flag.
Sure.
There.
And I want to drill down a little more on this specific issue before we go to these broader points.
Before you do that, Gordon, we just have to acknowledge the wasp behind me. Don't worry, it's not going to get me.
That's right. I know it's infested. One of the cameras back there. So the first person you spoke to in your story here today had done a couple of projects with this contractor already, and I guess that's what lulled him into that sense of trust.
Right.
Before, because when you say he paid in advance that much money, I recoiled at that.
Yes,
To pay a contractor
yeah.
that much up front is a little unusual.
And this gentleman, J.T. Bass, a very smart guy, and really honestly, Timothy Porter had gained his trust because the first job he did was a crawl space job, and he did it well, and he paid $8,000 for it after the fact, and it was fine. And then requested the down payment for the kitchen, completed that in a slower time frame with some issues, but they still had the trust there. So it was for this third project that they said, you know what, we'll just write one lump sum check. We'll bring the kitchen up to date with that check, and then we'll also move forward. The $16,000 was moving forward for the next project, and unfortunately, that's when they really got taken.
And that money is for now at least gone. Now he has a lawyer, so I assume there's a civil lawsuit to try and recover some of that money.
And actually, it's been going on for 2 years, and that judgment was found that he was owed that money, that $16,000. But there is a lot of question about whether he'll be paid, only because the track record from the previous cases, he hasn't paid. Now, I will state, a lot of those previous cases in Public Index are from many, many years ago, and Timothy Porter has said he is a changed man. But the problem is that not only since the story was aired, but even while I was researching the story, there were a few people who spoke to me off the record because they were so concerned they weren't going to get their tiny home that they didn't want to go on the record with it. And certainly I wouldn't want to prohibit anybody from getting what they've already paid for, so I totally understand that. But J.T. Bass is not the only recent case of this situation from what these other people are telling me.
Yeah, for people who don't have experience with those kinds of civil judgments in a case like this where you sue somebody for work not done, as you point out, you might win in court. That doesn't mean you're ever actually going to get any of that money back.
Exactly. Now, we checked also with Building and Code because Timothy Porter is running a business right now where he does retrofit those tiny homes. And again, they said that he doesn't have any license to do that work either. And so his business right now is in question. So what's going to happen to his current clients at this point, is unclear. But this is just the broader picture here is that you really do have to do your homework. You have to check on that license with LLR. You really should check to make sure someone is bonded as well, and insured, because if they show up on your property and then they fall on your property and break their back or whatever, yes, you do have home insurance that might cover some of that, but they could sue you for more. So you really have to make sure that they're covered on their end, especially if they have workers as well on site.
And so let's, now that we've drilled down on this particular case, and obviously not all contractors are going to leave you in this situation, but before you check out, I was always told the best thing to do is go door to door with your neighbors and say, have you ever had a home remodel done? What did it cost, and are you happy?
Definitely.
This is sort of the same advice.
Yes. In fact, in the neighborhood that I live in, we have like kind of a ladies group where anytime we have anybody coming to our house, we ask, hey, can you recommend a plumber? Hey, can you recommend this? And that really goes a long way. Usually, if your neighbors have had a good experience, usually you will too. One of the points in this that I wanted to mention that you're seeing right before you is keep those updated contracts. I know that, hindsight's always 20/20, but Mr. Bass was saying that when they did have to alter that kitchen renovation and bring it down after his wife lost her job, that he really wishes that he had asked, he actually did ask, I should say, for a contract revision. And he says that Timothy Porter told him, oh, no need to do that. Don't worry. We got it all covered. It's an agreement. And they had an oral agreement. But in a court of law, that oral agreement is certainly not going to be as powerful as anything in writing.
No, that's another gasp from me in your story there, Diane, where it's, I thought to myself, if you don't get it in writing, don't pay any money up front.
Incidentally, this is a side story with this story, but I also, the same day that I shot this story over a period of days, I also talked to another woman who was facing a similar contract issue with somebody else. And in that situation, we were in the middle of the shoot, and I got a call from his attorney who actually knew me and said, hey, I hear that you're there and talking about this. If he can get the job done, could you hold off on that particular part of the story. And so we did hold off on that particular part of the story because as a here to help person who really just wants to see people get some relief, we wanted to give that homeowner every opportunity. And so that contractor has done most of the job that he said he's going to do. But there still may be more contractor stories to come because unfortunately, this really does happen all too often.
And it's, again, whether maybe it's a contractor at your home, maybe it's the auto repair shop, but whenever you're entering into a contract with somebody who knows a lot more than you about what you're asking them to do, there's always a fear that maybe you'll be taken advantage of.
Yeah, so you got to be careful.
All right, that is our consumer expert, Diane Lee. We're going to be back with more Here to Help right after this quick break. Welcome back. We are again here to help. Diane Lee still with us here. And now we're going to talk maybe what is really the theme of this entire show all the time, Diane, which is just how do we save a little bit of money, especially when maybe we're getting a little bit nervous about how the economy is going.
Definitely. And there's not one of us that doesn't need to save for one reason or the other. So here are some hopefully helpful tips.
All right, be honest. How much are you really paying for groceries and streaming services each month? Getting a realistic picture can get you on the road to better financial footing. I'm 7 News consumer anchor Diane Lee, and I talk to the experts and savvy parents about what we can all do to beef up our savings. If necessity is the mother of invention, mom of 3 Stephanie Lewis has certainly come up with some creative ways to save for her family. She says the biggest savings has been slashing that grocery bill.
I can get my cart full and not even spend $100, where if I go to the big chain stores, a couple of bags, and you're at $100.
Really? Let's take a closer look. Lewis shops at Aldi, where the store brand Fruit Round cereal option is more than $3 cheaper than the brand name Fruit Loops. These cotton candy grapes are $1.10 cheaper per pound than Publix. The grass-fed 93% lean beef is $1.50 cheaper than Walmart, and its organic milk is $1.60 cheaper than Target. A recent report by Aldi compared its private label pricing to other store brands and found a family of 4 can save nearly $2,000 a year. And when it comes to the more expensive brand name products, the savings jumps to nearly $4,000. The point is, shoppers like Jeff Schlouch say when you choose to buy your groceries at places that offer better pricing, you notice a difference.
Yeah, it definitely saves us a lot of money. We want to eat that way, organic and healthy, no matter where we shop. So having that option here for much lower prices is a game changer.
Sorry, excuse me?
Of course, Lewis has other savings up her sleeve, like avoiding the cost of too many streaming services by rotating between them so you're only paying for 1 or 2 at a time.
Catch up on some TV shows, and then at the end of 6 months, have a reminder in your phone, cancel, try something new, and it saves you a lot of money.
So we flipped the script. We did the reverse budgeting.
As for paying down debt, Gina Zachariah has achieved Instagram fame as the saving whiz for paying off more than $100,000 in credit card debt over 5 years. She says to start, transfer balances to cards that offer 0% APR promotions. Then follow a reverse budget where you pay off a portion of the debt first each month and limit remaining expenses to what's left. Finally, ask your creditors to work with you.
We were able to negotiate those interest rates down a little bit. A lot of people don't realize that banks actually want to work with you.
Now more than ever, there are also ample side gigs that can bring in extra income, from Uber drivers to Instacart shoppers.
I have to get this creamy butter.
The Espositos supplement their retirement income by taking on a tenant.
We rent an apartment that my husband built, a detached garage, and we rent it to traveling nurses.
As for your investments, financial advisor Becca Mathis says make your savings count by storing emergency funds in a high-yield savings account that earns around 5% interest. And don't succumb to these spending pitfalls.
Where do you see the biggest mistakes with people just mishandling money?
A couple things come to mind there. I think in today's social media world, it's very easy to let yourself get caught up and always want more. The second thing I would say, when the market is down, sometimes people want to get out. If you choose to move out at the bottom, you're more than likely going to miss out on the recovery.
Back at the store, Lewis doesn't just stick to a budget with food. Instead of doing back-to-school shopping before school, she buys supplies and her kids' clothes mainly when sales hit at the end of each season.
They've got them 75% off. Grab it, stick it in the closet, and it's great for next season.
Now, finally, one surefire way to prevent major money problems is to build an emergency fund that covers 3 to 6 months of expenses. That way, if something happens, like your car breaks down, you won't have to go into high interest debt.
I have to say on that last point, for many, many years, every time I heard that advice, I'd give the big eye roll and say, boy, I wish I could save 4 months of expenses. It's a lot easier said than done.
Yeah, but we have to keep saying it because that emergency fund is so key. I mean, especially in an uncertain economy, you don't know how the job market's going to be. You really, during times when you can save a little bit, you want to think of putting that first towards your emergency fund or towards paying down, credit card debt. Both of those things are equally important.
Yeah, and let's take some of these specific money-saving tips sort of one at a time. So you started at a grocery store, probably, at least in terms of regular weekly expenses, one of our biggest for a lot of people. You did notice some pretty considerable savings in there, just to value shopping
Absolutely.
off-brand.
Yeah, and if you'll notice, I really chose the products that are kind of more high-end. You got the organic milk, you got the, those special grapes that I showed, and we got the grass-fed beef, because those are examples of what maybe people might not believe is at Aldi's, and yet it is fabulous food that is a lot less expensive there in particular. And so the other stuff is also comparatively less expensive. There was a recent article that came out of someone had just shopped at Walmart versus Aldi and did price comparisons of each and did find that it was like $27 cheaper at Aldi. I'm not trying to do an advertisement for Aldi by any means. It's just because there are things you may not like about it. You have to bring a quarter, because if you don't have a quarter, you cannot get the shopping cart. You have to have a quarter to get the shopping cart, and then you get your quarter back at the end when you put the shopping cart back. It's really just to encourage people to not leave it by the cars. And then you also either need to buy bags or bring your own bags. Now, for people who are in favor of that because they don't have to, add more bags to the landfill, bring your own bags. But so it's a different style. You kind of have to get used to it. You're not going to see every brand name there by any means at all, but there are really good quality organic options. Like here's the
Cotton
options
candy
again.
Grapes, is that what those were called?
Have you ever had them? They're delicious.
No, I have
you got. They're so yummy. Yeah, but you see the grass-fed beef, and so an organic milk, and so the savings can really add up.
For sure. And frankly, you keep mentioning Aldi and of course Walmart and the other big discount chains, but they'll have these off-brands, for instance, the cereals and whatnot. Even at your neighborhood grocery store, wherever it is, they'll probably be on the very bottom shelf or the very top shelf, because the expensive ones pay for very visible placement on those shelves.
Point blank, wherever you shop, as far as the grocery store, go for those off-brand labels, the ones that are created by the actual supermarket. Either way, but my argument is that even those off-brand labels at most of the other grocery stores are going to be more expensive than particularly the off-brand labels at Aldi. You might find. You should just go experiment. If you're looking to save money, see if you can get into that. Sometimes if I'm on a week when I really want to save, I will only shop at the grocery store where I know I can save the most, and not allow myself to buy some of the other brands at the others, even if I like those. And you really can save.
The really nice prepared foods.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Let's talk about the streaming services. This is something I do. So, for instance, a show I really like is on Apple TV Plus, and I'll resubscribe to it, and then when I've watched that show, I will cancel it until the next season of that show comes out. You really can juggle. You're not watching 6 at a time.
Right, exactly. I'm giving you a golf clap, by the way, because whereas I follow my own advice with the grocery store, I don't with the streaming services. So I'm somebody who needs to evaluate that again. And it's partly because my husband likes this and I like that. And I know we just have too much. So this is one of those stories that sort of gave me that motivation to go back and say, okay, we really need to sit down and analyze how much we have and what we're paying. It's easy, especially when you've got a couple, that one person's paying this, the other person's paying that, and you don't really keep note of how much you're paying altogether.
Yeah, next thing you know, you really, 6 different ones. As always, this content delivered to you free of charge. One more time. So there are a lot of different these. It sounds like nickel and dime stuff, Diane. It really does. A dollar here, a dollar there. But the consumers you were talking to sound like they've noticed actually a pretty substantial difference with these things.
Oh, yeah, definitely. That wonderful mom that we met in the store who agreed to talk to us about all those different techniques she uses. I mean, even the one about buying clothing for her children instead of doing it specifically at the times when the seasons are changing packaging and the clothes are going to be most expensive, she waits till the end of the season and buys ahead, knowing her kids are going to grow. So she might buy like one size up and put it in the closet. And she says that's allowed her to save so much, because if you think about it, those end of the season sales, they can be 50 to 75% off. I mean, one's coming up in the month of July. You're going to see a lot of those summer sales for clothes that are summer oriented start to go on sale. So you get towards that end of the season. You can still wear some of those clothes in South Carolina, of course. So
that's
yeah,
very, very true. And let's get to what may be the more complicated element here, which is sort of juggling different amounts of debt. This is particularly, this advice we have on the screen here, related to credit card debt, which, boy, will really, really sabotage people's ability to save.
Yeah, with credit card debt, it really is so unfortunate because the interest rates are just so astronomical. So one of the first techniques that this savvy woman explained was that you can transfer to a 0% APR card. They are still available. You do have to have pretty decent credit to get that, I will say, but and that's not going to last for forever. But usually they offer that for about 6 months to a year. So if you can transfer everything to that, you buy yourself a little time where the interest doesn't accrue during that time. Then during that time, you can follow this, what it's called a reverse budget. It is a budget, but what it means is instead of thinking of it in the way where you wait to see what you have left over and then put that in savings, you actually do that in reverse. You prioritize either putting money into an emergency fund or paying down the debt, or maybe a little into both, because they're both very important. And then after that, you say, what do I have left over? And that's what you use for your monthly
So you're
expenses.
just taking it off the top. I have
Exactly.
say I have $1,000 a month. I'm going to take that $200 out of the assets column right at the beginning.
Yep, and if you do it automatically, that's when you know it really gets done every month. So that's a good technique as well.
Okay, Diane, these are fantastic tips for people that, again, like I say, it does add up quickly, especially that credit card hack.
Yeah.
And there are other ways to do it. I mean, obviously, other ways to try and move that money around. Maybe you could get a home equity loan that's cheaper than your credit cards. But
Right.
to your point, Diane, boy, credit card debt will make it impossible to build wealth. And so it's a huge part of this.
Yeah, a little food for thought, and hopefully some of these tips might save you some money.
All right, that's been Diane Lee, our consumer expert. I'm Gordon Dill. As always, we're here to help. We'll see you again next time.